the fact that a lot of these campaigns require so many people pitching in and advocates kind of standing on the shoulders of other advocates, the work that we're laying down, because sometimes campaigns aren't immediate. Sometimes they are. Sometimes you never even hear about them. We might email a company and they quietly stop, but for some reason, it doesn't make big press and you'll never hear about it. But that cruelty stopped. Those animals were spared. That's also great. But sometimes it does take a while, and it takes a lot of people pitching in and doing their parts. And again, like you said, going out on a limb and maybe getting a little uncomfortable, maybe getting a butter knife taken to your hand very gently by the fire department some days.
Welcome to the Better Life for Animals podcast, where we amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. Through powerful stories and expert insights, we shine a light on the efforts to rescue, protect, and advocate for animals. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Every follower helps us reach more people and support animal sanctuaries. Enjoy the conversation.
There are people who care about animals, and then there are people who glue their hand to the counter at Starbucks headquarters until something changes. My guest today is the latter. Amber Canavan is the Associate Director of Vegan Campaigns at PETA, and she has spent over 2 decades doing whatever it takes, protests, corporate negotiations, legislation, rescues, to make the world less cruel for animals. Along the way, she's convinced major retailers like Costco, Target, and Albertsons to drop coconut milk brands tied to forced monkey labor in Thailand, pushed Kikkoman to end decades of animal experiments, helped pass New York's ban on foie gras sales, and personally coordinated the rescue of over 400 hens from a shutting down egg facility. The list goes on, but more importantly, the animals are better off because of it. Amber, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. I sometimes forget about the gluing incident, but that totally happened.
Got to make your point. You've said that you became passionate about animal rights after writing a paper in high school. What did you learn in that process that changed you?
Yeah, speaking of throwbacks, right? So I used to kind of think that I chose the topic randomly, but then I realized that there must have been so much work from animal rights advocates, PETA, and other groups to have gotten that idea in my mind in the first place. So even while I kind of came to it on my own by finding a book on animal rights in the library, what really helped me was early days of AOL dial-up, my school's, computer lab, and finding, PETA's website and other animal rights groups, and just uncovering this whole other side of the world that I had no idea of. And that was actually, hidden from me. That was the other side of things, is I was a very curious child. I liked nature and animals, but I realized even, my parents and the culture around me, my teachers were not telling quite the whole truth about how our society treats animals. And that just kind of set me down a path for my whole life, all the way towards gluing my hand to Starbucks and many other exciting life events.
Well, being vegan for over 23 years puts you ahead of a lot of the mainstream conversation. I'm wondering what it was like advocating in those early days before it was more culturally accepted.
Well, I really like to see that perspective of, especially, when you're involved in advocating for animals, things can seem a bit grim sometimes. We see a lot of pretty awful things during investigations, and change never ever happens as fast as we want it to. But the benefit of kind of seeing this progression of society changing its views on animals, we're definitely not there yet, of course. But nowadays I might have to argue with people over the fact that fish and crustaceans like lobsters and crabs feel pain. Um, back then I was still having to argue that chickens and sometimes even dogs and cats could feel pain and had emotions. So we're getting there. I thought I'd have to be protesting ringling every summer for the rest of my life in my hometown. And I had the privilege of attending the last ever Ringling show in Long Island several years ago, and they stopped using animals entirely in my lifetime. So, yeah, change does happen. Change happens.
That's very encouraging. So when I think of PETA, they're known for the bold, attention-grabbing campaigns. How do you decide when to go disruptive versus when a quieter corporate negotiation will get better results for animals?
Yeah, a lot of times what people only see is the more flashy stuff, right? That's when we're out there getting press, we're out on the streets, we're outside of the boardrooms, we're inside the boardrooms in many cases. But a lot of campaigns can be won before a protest sign is ever deployed. And those are the best ones. So PETA does have, a whole department. We have a lot of work dedicated towards, winning those campaigns for animals, getting cruelty stopped before we ever even have to, go to the protesting route. And that involves a lot of behind the scenes work, calls and emails. Then we have our action alerts, which we're always grateful for people participating in. You can go to PETA.org /take action. We have so many action alerts. Those aren't just a random online petition that goes into a pit on the internet. Those actually do go towards helping PETA win campaigns. And then, of course, activists are so essential. Animal advocates who will get out there and do that work on the streets. And we really need it all, whatever people's skills and passions are. I was never planning to become a public speaker, but that was a skill set that I, developed and have, used to help animals as a shy vegetarian and then vegan, 14-year-old. I never imagined that was going to be something I'd be doing, but people have skills, and we're always looking to, harness people's skills and passion, and that's when we can really, really make some changes.
I can appreciate what you're saying, Amber, but I sometimes think it's when we know we're doing something for the animals who need us so badly that we will rise to that occasion and put ourselves in positions of discomfort because we know it might help them when we otherwise wouldn't. So good for you. I'm really interested in having you walk us through the Starbucks vegan milk upcharge campaign, from the moment you identified it as a target to when they finally caved, and what made the difference.
Yeah, that campaign was very interesting since, a lot of our campaigns are, a bit more directly on the animals, right? It's stop selling this thing, feathers, for instance, or wool or leather or fur. In this case, we were just asking for the end to the massive upcharge for vegan milks in Starbucks drinks. And, the reason that this harms animals is because it penalizes people for choosing that vegan option, and, pushes them towards, well, I'm just going to grab the cow's milk as the default, because in some cases, 80, 90, we saw up to $1.20, $1.50 upcharge just to swap in that vegan milk. Massive upcharge for that. And, part of animal advocacy is making vegan foods more affordable and accessible. So we realized that Starbucks was kind of the linchpin here. The small coffee chains, their competitors, the small individual brick and mortar shops, whenever anyone complained to them about why they were upcharging, they're like, well, Starbucks does. So Starbucks, became, uh, the apple of my eye for a while, for a couple of years. And we were really pushing them to end that upcharge because we knew, like Domino's, the rest of the coffee chain industry was going to follow. So we were going to the CEO, we bought stock, we were outside their headquarters in Seattle. We had billboards, we had people protesting. Um, at the time, they had this thing they called a third space policy, and that's, we don't really have the public square anymore, but we need third spaces in our society, someplace you can go to hang out in that's, you don't necessarily have to pay or buy a coffee. So Starbucks had one of these policies. So people were going in and doing work-ins inside Starbucks with their signs saying, "Hey, Starbucks, please stop the upcharge." We had those happening all across the country. And Starbucks ended up having a change of CEOs, which I think did help. We sent him a letter, and then we were like, "We're going to give you some time to think about this." And he did. And finally, he stopped. And I did neglect to mention the gluing incident. So I can talk about that because that is one of those flashy things. I'm not the only one who did it. James Cromwell actually also did it in New York City. And basically, it just involved getting in line, letting everybody in front of you go, slapping some super glue on my hand, and slapping that to the counter. And the fire department had to come. They were very confused. They used a butter knife to scrape my hand off the countertop, and that really caught the attention of the company, after, not hearing from them for quite a while.
So it was that little action you think that took them over the edge and
It
said,
was
okay.
one of many. So I was kind of the test case. We were testing out this new thing to do, and then James Cromwell did it. He also did a really awesome spoof ad for Starbucks where he was dressed up as like a Starbucks executive, and he's like, "Well, we really care about the environment, our profits. I mean, the environment. That's why we." It was great. It's up on PETA's YouTube and our website. He did such a good job spoofing, a money grubbing Starbucks executive profiting off of people wanting to help the environment and animals. So, and I think that's the point. Like, I'm not going to take all the credit for that one incident, but the fact that a lot of these campaigns require so many people pitching in and advocates kind of standing on the shoulders of other advocates, the work that we're laying down, because sometimes campaigns aren't immediate. Sometimes they are. Sometimes you never even hear about them. We might email a company and they quietly stop, but for some reason, it doesn't make big press and you'll never hear about it. But that cruelty stopped. Those animals were spared. That's also great. But sometimes it does take a while, and it takes a lot of people pitching in and doing their parts. And again, like you said, going out on a limb and maybe getting a little uncomfortable, maybe getting a butter knife taken to your hand very gently by the fire department some days.
The Hell on Wheels traveling chicken truck brings graphic imagery directly to people on the street. What kind of responses do you see, and do you believe that these face-to-face confrontations shift behavior?
I love our Hell on Wheels truck. I helped with the early concepts of this truck, and frankly, I didn't know if we were going to be able to pull something like this off. So the Hell on Wheels trucks are like a life-sized box truck that has been renovated to look just like a truck that is crammed full of animals on the way to the slaughterhouse. And it doesn't just look like it, it sounds like it. So we have the crying noises blasting on speakers of animals who are in pain, they're scared, and they are headed to their deaths. And it's really powerful. It gets people to stop in their tracks. Maybe they don't see the truck right off the bat, but they hear it and they get curious of what is going on. Because well, most of the time, slaughterhouses are way out in the country. They're pretty nondescript, and they're not, they don't have glass walls. You know, Paul McCartney said if slaughterhouses had glass walls, everyone would be vegetarian or vegan, right? So we kind of bring that hidden thing, that thing that's shoved off to where people aren't seeing it, into the city centers. We will go to the busy parts of towns. We will go outside of barbecue restaurants and places that sell a lot of meat and get that conversation going. We have our free vegan starter guides, which are also available at PETA.org. If people want to order a stack of those to leave at their libraries or the little free libraries in their communities or table with them, we will send those to anybody who requests them. And we distribute those also from the truck. So people might be a little disturbed, might be a little upset, curious. They learned something that day, and then they're going away with that packet of resources with the recipes and restaurant guides so they can, you know, get started on changing their diets and stop paying people to put those animals on those slaughterhouse trucks in the first place.
Very effective. You helped rescue over 400 hens from a cage-free facility while it was closing. So what was that experience like on the ground?
Yeah, that was quite an experience. So a cage-free organic farm here in Oregon announced that it was shutting down. And at first, they were just trying to sell all of the birds off. But then something changed, something fell through with their sale, and they were just like letting people show up and shove birds into tote bins that had no air holes, garbage bags, live birds in there. And we helped coordinate rescuing about 435 birds from that facility. These were beautiful red-brown hens who had been used for their eggs, and they went to reputable sanctuaries and adoptive homes and were able to recover and be rehabilitated, you know, from what was done to them in these facilities. PETA recently, earlier this year, released a white paper about cage-free conditions, and I was able to see firsthand that cage-free doesn't really mean what people think it means. These birds were crammed together. They were plucked bare, red raw skin from the filthy conditions and the crowding and the stress. And then they were only 17 months old. They hadn't even hit their second birthday, and they were going to be killed. And that happens to all hens used by the egg industry. Their bodies just wear out, and they're already barely profitable at it as is. Like they're always eating too much food. They're, you know, the expenses, even being crammed in a factory farm, are the profit margins are already so thin. But as soon as their production drops just by that amount, they are useless and they are going to be replaced. So even if the farm had been thankfully shutting down at that point, those girls had a death warrant signed on them the day they arrived at the farm. And luckily we were able to get several hundred out. I was lucky enough to adopt a few and saw the amazing resilience that they have. They're like both so delicate at the same time as being so resilient, and seeing them, I was prepared for them to never trust humans. I wouldn't blame them after what had happened to them. But seeing their personalities blossom when they actually got to be chickens and see grass and sunlight for the first time was really gratifying and just so nice to see after, you know, again, there's so much pain and suffering out in the world that sometimes we can't stop. And it was really nice to see them be able to be chickens and live their lives.
I like that they made their way to a sanctuary. We love to support sanctuaries here on Better Life for Animals.
It's such important work. It's such tough work. I really
Mhm.
appreciate it now more than ever with the little flock that I was caring for, how much care they really need. So absolutely support those reputable sanctuaries that are out there. Um, they're doing amazing work.
Agreed.
You're listening to Better Life for Animals podcast. Our mission is to amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. First of all, go ahead and subscribe to this channel wherever you're watching or listening. And then get involved by visiting betterlifeforanimals.com. That's betterlifeforanimals.com. Be sure to check out our blog, learn more about incredible sanctuaries, and explore our book section, where 100% of net proceeds from book sales are donated to sanctuaries. Every action you take helps to make a difference. And remember, subscribe to this channel. And now, back to the show.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Amber Canavan of PETA, and this is Better Life for Animals. Amber, the coconut milk and forced monkey labor campaign is one that a lot of people don't know about. How did you find these issues? And is it through your own investigations, tips, partner organizations? Tell us about it.
The coconut campaign is one of those ones where I'm like, again, I've been doing this for so long, and humanity doesn't cease to amaze and confuse me at the ways that we will harm and exploit other species sometimes. So the Thai coconut campaign is basically that in this particular country, for whatever reason, the industry developed that they use forced monkey labor to harvest coconuts out of the coconut trees. So whenever you see coconut milk that is labeled from Thailand, you want to give it the side eye and maybe leave it on the shelf. Other countries use different methods. They might use machinery to harvest them. They might use shorter trees so you don't have to climb as high to harvest the coconuts, and other methods that don't involve the exploitation and suffering of monkeys. But Thailand is a whole nother issue. And the reason we know about this is because PETA Asia, one of our entities, has investigated the Thai coconut industry multiple times over the years. And each time we'd find companies saying, oh, no, 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 it's not us. We don't use that in our supply chain. And then PETA goes in and actually looks what's happening on the ground at these farms, and they were indeed using the monkeys. Sometimes the monkeys weren't even being kept on the property. They would only be brought in for the harvest time. So the companies are able to kind of say, oh, no, 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 that's not happening. Well, it actually was. So we have been encouraging people to be careful about where they're getting their coconut milk from. And by coconut milk, I mean like the canned coconut milk that you'll see. Other coconut products like coconut milk meant for like your cereal in the cartons is generally safe. It's just a different kind of coconut from Thailand that comes in those cans that people should watch out for. Again, I'll plug PETA.org. We do have a resource on our website for people to kind of find out more and parse out which coconut brands to avoid. But basically, the monkeys are, tethered by their necks, and then they're forced to just go pick these very large coconuts that are almost the size of their bodies, all day. And they're just living lives of deprivation, just being chained up all the time and used for forced labor. So, of all the things.
Well, you got Costco, Target, and Albertsons to act. What is it about that kind of corporate pressure campaign that works? And what does it take to get a major retailer to actually move?
that all involved a lot of behind the scenes talks with these companies. Um, However, we did end up action alerting, which is our online, our online petitions at PETA.org. Tens of thousands of people signed those, and eventually the companies did change their policies to stop sourcing from some of the brands that were implicated in the investigations. But some of them, it also did involve some protests. We had people who were wearing prisoner outfits and chains and were sitting on the register aisles of Whole Foods, for example. You'd think Whole Foods is generally, better about animal welfare policies, but Whole Foods was actually a tough one to crack. We ended up getting their supplier to change their policy instead of Whole Foods. However, the evidence has just mounted up that with how secretive the industry is being, it's best to just, even if you see Thai coconut milk in a can on a store shelf, it is at this point best to just avoid it all entirely, because of the secrecy and the uncertainty about how some of these brands are acting with the monkeys in their supply chain.
So when you're approaching a corporate actor, it's all about money, and then it's about being found out. It's never about doing the right thing the first time. That's the way it sounds.
Sometimes it is, yes. Sometimes they, maybe don't think that there's enough, public scrutiny and enough people who care about the issue to have to do something that, might have to shift their supply chain or to stop selling a certain product. So that is really where people being active and using their voices and getting involved is so important. I can't even stress it enough, because that also helps on the quieter campaigns that never need to get to protesting, because then we can go to the company and say, hey, we're going to have to let our supporters know. Like, they might know that they are going to be getting hundreds of thousands of emails from customers who are upset by it, or they might have people leafleting outside of their locations. And just knowing that people power might be activated if they don't take a look at their policies and makes a better one for animals, then, that also does win campaigns before they even have to technically start as well.
You worked with New York City to ban the foie gras. What did that legislative process look like, and how did PETA's outside pressure coordinate with the work happening inside the council chambers?
Yeah, that was an exciting one. And I will say we did also just have another win very recently with Portland, where I'm currently based. So Portland just passed a ban on the sale of foie gras as well. So other cities are following New York City's lead. It's also banned in the state of California, but both the production and sale there. And we're seeing a lot of interest and progress also with campaigns to just get restaurants to stop selling it. So with New York City in particular, the city council had shown interest. There's an organization there called VFAR that has worked on getting the city council to pass animal-friendly legislation. And I went to the hearing there as PETA's representative, but also as a former cruelty investigator of the foie gras industry. So I have been inside a foie gras farm, and I've seen with my own eyes the conditions that the ducks are kept in to produce foie gras. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is or needs a reminder, it's not a very common menu item, but it is very much out there, and it is a big enough industry to support two foie gras factory farms, which are both located in New York State. And the ducks are force fed to exploit a part of their biology that allows them to survive the rigors of migration. So they're able to gorge themselves during the season and store fat in their liver, and that helps them survive going on these amazing across the world flights to their breeding grounds and back. The foie gras industry exploits that ability by shoving a tube down their throat and force feeding them pounds of grain mash over a very short period of time, and then slaughtering them when their livers are about 10 times the natural size. And it's sold as a delicacy in some restaurants. So it's been banned in over a dozen countries. So many companies have banished it from their menus or from their sales, like IKEA, Wolfgang Puck, like all the way from like Costco to Wolfgang Puck have taken it, have said that they're not going to sell it or touch it really. So New York City Council had, proposed this thing. We testified. The farms actually put a bunch of their workers on buses and bussed them into the city and had them cry in front of the city council. The city council stayed strong and did vote to ban it. So it's also been caught up in the courts for a couple years because I'm from New York State. We have a bunch of weird ag and markets laws, but it is on its way. It's been cleared to be able to be enforced. So it's going to be a really big thing as soon as it is enforced. And then, of course, we have Portland now, and hopefully some more cities along the way. Washington, D.C., just yesterday or the day before, got enough ballot signatures to put a ban on the sale of foie gras on the voter ballot in Washington, D.C. Denver's also going on a similar path. So we're seeing a lot of progress there, a lot of excitement. People who live in the Denver or DC areas are definitely invited to get involved in those. It's very, very exciting.
Indeed. When legislation fails or gets watered down, how do you keep your team's energy and momentum going?
That is a good question. I never thought I would become a lobbyist or work on legislative things. It definitely has its ups and downs and surprises. Sometimes bills they are dead in the water all of a sudden. And yeah, you have to kind of deal with it and come back again the next session. But I see those as working in conjunction with the corporate campaigns that we have. So, restaurants might stop selling foie gras, for example, but then a new restaurant might open and they do. So that's where legislation can come into play to make it so that they can't sell that incredibly cruel product in the first place. So it's kind of a both and, right? If too many restaurants are already selling it, then there's going to be a lot of opposition to the legislation. So campaigns, advocates talking to the restaurants and getting it off the menu, so fewer restaurants are already selling it by the time the legislation comes across and has less opposition, can be really helpful. But again, as with all things, nothing's ever happening as fast as it can, as it should, as it needs to be for the animals who need our help all the time and so badly. But as dreary as I feel some days, there is still so much hope and so much need. And, I can't throw in the towel. I always say, it's a bit cliche, but activism is the antidote to despair. So sometimes you have a setback and you get back in there because we don't know how much worse it would be if we weren't here holding that line and pushing that line toward society changing its views of animals. Again, if so many people hadn't been pushing to get Ringling to stop using animals, to get these foie gras bans in place, we're banning glue traps as well in several cities around the country. That wouldn't have happened if people had just sat back and done nothing.
PETA has tens of millions of supporters globally. I mean, you are the big one and the old one, the one we all know about. And so you've got a great brand there. And I'm just wondering how you think about translating all of that reach and, the substantial, support into sustained behavioral change, more than just awareness. How do we cross that bridge?
That is a good question. I think some issues are not easier than others, but there are issues that, the vast majority of society does agree on. We just haven't gotten towards, making that ideal, a reality, right? People don't like to see dogs and cats abused, but we are still facing an overpopulation crisis. Even in polls, people do believe that animals used for food deserve protection. A surprisingly large number of people said they would be in favor of shutting down slaughterhouses, even though, logically that would mean that there's going to be no more beef hamburgers. It's going to be vegan burgers, right? So, I mean, that is kind of the crux of what we're doing. We have to change society's perceptions of animals. A lot of that is telling people who animals are. And that's why PETA's slogan right now has been that every animal is someone. We're telling that story and that narrative that these are individuals who can feel pain and the amazing abilities that they have that maybe people don't realize, the depth of how they care for their babies. And, there's mother cows running after, crying after their babies when they're being taken away from them in the dairy industry. Mother chickens who are sheltering their babies during a rainstorm under her wing. Animals mourning for their mates when they pass away. I think there's a lot of power to those stories for getting kind of through that clutter of social media and everything that is going on in the world. And at the end of the day, it is a message of compassion. But I think the other side of the answer to that is it's that combination of individual change and outreach in our communities. It is the corporate change and institutional change, like students getting food policies for their dorm room cafeterias at their colleges. So that's institutional change. And then policy change, the legislation, the lobbying, and the ballot initiatives that will, set that stuff into stone, with actual legislation with actual teeth, not just saying, it's not good to harm animals. It's actually giving some enforcement to that. So it's really finding that niche of kind of all four, I guess, of those columns. And, PETA does a bit of everything since we are the largest animal rights organization in the world, and we focus on all of those aspects too. Some organizations focus only on dog and cat and companion animal issues. Some solely focus on animal experimentation. Some only focus on animals in entertainment, and some only focus on animals used for food. Ours is animals aren't ours to use for food, clothing, entertainment, experimentation, or any other purpose. So that's a pretty wide tent, but we're kind of working on all of those in conjunction. And I think some of the easier issues, you think of maybe people really care about dogs and cats, or elephants in circuses, or whales and dolphins in seaquariums. And those issues bring them in, and then maybe they're going to start thinking about the farmed animals, who are some of the most numerously and egregiously abused. We're talking, 10 billion farmed animals every year in the United States alone. That's a big tackle. So I just rambled a lot there, so I'll hand it back to you.
Not at all. Amber, I so appreciate you being on our show today. You have such a wealth of experience and information. PETA is, the gold standard in animal advocacy. And I normally would say, how can we find you? But I think in this case, our listeners can find PETA on the internet and join in and participate in all your many fine campaigns and make your voices heard. So thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you so much. I love talking about this topic, and just seeing, I appreciate you and what you do in your show, and creating that space to have these important conversations.
Thank you. This has been Amber Canavan of PETA. And if you have enjoyed today's conversation as I have, please like and subscribe so that we can create a better life for animals.
Thank you for joining us on the Better Life for Animals podcast. Together, we can create a world where all beings are treated with dignity, respect, and care. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more people and spread awareness about the incredible work happening in animal sanctuaries. You can also share this episode with friends and fellow advocates to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep speaking up, taking action, and making a difference for the animals.